Previously on The Beginning After the End. Arthur began his training for the oncoming war. His first teacher, Cordry, trained him in martial arts and combat, teaching him the importance of being in tune with his body and proper conservation and distribution of his mana. After completing the first part of his training, Arthur moved on to the next stage and trained with Winsome. There he was tasked with capturing and obtaining specific items within the Asheran forest, without the usage of external mana arts. This stage proved to be a lot more challenging, as Arthur struggled to gather the items that he needed. But with his perseverance and intelligence, Arthur managed to learn the Mirage Walk, a move that allowed him to completely hide his presence. He later upgraded the skill and developed the Burst Step, which is a move that allows Arthur to travel short distances in an instant undetected. During his training, Arthur came face to face with a mighty Titan bear and barely managed to survive his encounter with it. With the Burst Step, Arthur managed to take down the beast and fainted. Days later, Arthur woke up in bed. When he tried to get up, he realized that he could not feel his legs. He was soon greeted by Meyer, an Ashura that had taken him in and had been using her mana to fix his legs. As he recuperated, Arthur learned more about his realm heart state and about the concept of ether. Although he gained information beyond his imagination, he also learned that due to him being born a human, some of the powers were beyond his grasp. This resulted in Meyer forbidding him from using the Mirage Walk and Burst Step. Although he could not use his newly developed techniques, he trained with Meyer in order to strengthen his realm heart state. Following his brief training with Meyer, Winsome took Arthur to meet with his next instructor, Ren, in order to help Arthur combine all the lessons that he had learned into his own unique fighting style, and to get Ren to create a custom weapon for Arthur. Ren forced Arthur to run many tests from sunrise to sunset, and from conjuring spells to fighting golems. After a long day of tests, Arthur finally got a chance to rest his body. Suddenly, Arthur was woken up by a loud scream. Arthur quickly summons his sword and assumed his battle stance as he looked for the danger. To his horror, Arthur stared as he witnessed a basilisk soldier holding Tess by the neck, as she begged for Arthur to save her.
Let go of me! Somebody help!
Tess? But how? Let go of her, you monster! Take this! Bring it, ugly. He wasn't aiming for me. Oh no, Tess! This has gone far enough. Ren, enough of this!
The basilisk and Tess then crumble and turn into a pile of sand as Ren appears from behind them. surprised that Arthur was able to catch on so quickly. Ren tells him not to take it personally and that he did it to teach him a lesson. He explains to him that right now he expended too much of his energy recklessly trying to save Tess. Arthur responds that although he knew that it wasn't the best course of action, there were people that he considered more important than even himself. Although he understood Arthur's point, Ren still stated that Arthur acted recklessly, even if it was for his mate, causing Arthur to blush. Arthur asked Ren if he could create anything with his mana. Ren tells him that he can create all sorts of scenarios, but he has limits. For example, he is not able to mimic the properties of water using earth. Looking back, Ren asks Arthur how he was able to pick up that both the general and Tess were fakes. Arthur explains to Ren that after he calmed down, by using what he learned from Meyer, he noticed the fluctuation of yellow earth and mana particles surrounding them. He also stated that although they were very realistic, it made no sense for a basilisk soldier to drag Tess all the way to Epheotis for Arthur to see. Arthur then asked Ren if it was possible for lesser beings to be able to reach the level of mana arts that Asuras were capable of. Ren tells him that although he does not like to say that anything is impossible, he states that the likelihood of lesser beings reaching that level is highly improbable. Nonetheless, Ren states that Arthur of all people should not be worried about it. Ren tells Arthur that he is a walking collection of statistical improbabilities. Due to the fact that he has the innate ability to comprehend the workings of all four elements and some of their deviating forms, and the comprehension necessary to unlock ether, everything about him was an outlier. He tells Arthur that even Asuras do not have that much innate talent or luck. Arthur thanks him for the compliment and asked him what his next assignment was. Ren tells Arthur that before moving on, he needed him to give him his dominant hand. Ren pulled out a triangular crystal and told Arthur that it was a mineral called a chlorite. Ren informs Arthur that by itself, the mineral is useless, but with the right refining and synthesizing, it is capable of remarkable things. Ren states that normally he would spend years or even decades constantly observing Arthur's fighting style in order to analyze the data collected and create the best weapon suited for him. But because of the circumstances, he needed to take a little gamble. Arthur asks Ren what he meant by that, but before he could ask his question, Ren smashed the mineral into Arthur's hand. As Arthur yelled in pain, Ren told Arthur that he synthesized the chlorite with Sylvia's feather along with a scale from Sylvie. He goes on to state that all of Arthur's actions, thoughts, and changes will factor into how the weapon will manifest, and that even he doesn't know how his weapon will come out. Confused, Arthur asked Ren why he would take that risk if he was uncertain about the outcome. Ren answered Arthur and tells him that he'll need more than a sharp stick to defeat the Frutra clan. He reminds Arthur that they were running out of time. Arthur asked Ren again what he meant and said that he thought that they had 2 more years left before the war. In a much more serious tone, Ren breaks the bad news to him and tells him that even though the main forces had yet to arrive, the war had already begun. When he heard the news, Arthur tried to leave immediately, saying that there was no point in him staying there if his friends and family were already fighting. But Ren shackled him to the ground and told him not to be foolish and that he was barely a challenge for a retainer. Ren tells Arthur to give him 1 year, and that with his help, he promised that he would make Arthur strong enough to give Dicathen a fighting chance. Although Arthur wanted to leave and fight, he knew that Ren was right. He calms down and agreed to stay and train with Ren for 1 more year. Back in Dicathen, Tess goes to her grandfather to tell him that she can fight and demands to be sent out to battle. But he tells her that she cannot go. Alder, who is also present there, tells Tess that she isn't ready yet and that the risk of putting her on the battlefield is too high. She may have gotten stronger, but it is still not enough. Tess gets mad and leaves the room. Alder tells Virion not to worry as his judgment is correct. Having Tess on the battlefield would only impede Arthur's decision-making. Tess goes straight to the main castle door to leave, but the guards stop her, telling her that they haven't received word from Virion or Alder, stating that anyone would be leaving. Suddenly, Vere appears and tells the guards that Tess is going with her on an errand. Although hesitant, the guards open the door for the lance and the princess. Tess thanks Vere for bailing her out. Together, they both head to Etistan City. Before they left, the guard told them to show proper identification on arrival, because of the war. With all the battles that have been happening throughout the Beast Glades, Etistan City is the farthest from the battles, and is an ideal defensive location, since it is bordered by the ocean from 3 sides. But still, King Glader had the city torn down and rebuilt to be the last line of defense against the Alacrian army. Both Vere and Tess roam the city market. Vere reminds Tess to keep her sword ready just in case something bad happens. As they are walking, Tess asks Vere how the Glader siblings were doing with their training. Vere tells her that Curtis, even though he is hardworking, has made slow progress because he has an average mana comprehension, despite him being a beast tamer. Princess Kathlyn, on the other hand, is doing very well since she has always been gifted. Tess asks Vere if Etistan City is in danger since it is close to Alacria, but Vere tells her that the Alacrians as of right now don't have an effective way of transporting a significant number of soldiers across the ocean. This is why they have been using a more discreet way of transportation by using teleportation gates that they have hidden throughout the Beast Glades. This way, the Vritrans can hide their soldiers safely in the endless mazes of dungeons and tunnels until they are ready to strike. All the information that they had about Alacria come from Director Goodsky. Alder partially broke the curse that bound her from releasing any information, but Cynthia still ended up in a coma. With King and Queen Greyzunders dead, the dwarves launched a rebellion, forcing the council to do their best to regain their allegiances and encourage individual cities to prepare for military action. Tessa's thoughts were interrupted when a girl suddenly ran into her. Her training kicked in automatically, and she pinned the girl down to the ground with her sword drawn. But Tess is pleasantly surprised when she realizes that the girl is actually Emily. Emily gives Tess a huge hug and apologizes for accidentally running into her. She tells Tess that she's in a hurry and that she must deliver the papers in her hands to her master Gideon. With Vere's approval, Tess asks Emily if it's okay if she and Vere could accompany her. On their way to meet Gideon, Tess and Emily start to chat as it has been so long since they both last seen each other. Emily asks Tess about Arthur, and Tess tells her that he has gone off to train somewhere in secret. Tess adds that whenever she tries to ask Alder about Arthur, all he says is that Arthur is training, and that she does not need to worry about him. Emily then asks Tess about Elijah, causing Tess's smile to disappear. Tess tells her that even now, there has been no news about Elijah's whereabouts. She says that it has been so long that even she has begun to assume the worst. Their talk gets interrupted when Vere tells them that they have arrived. They enter the building filled with an awful stench, where workers are seen refining and melting materials. Across the building, they hear Gideon shouting at a worker for mixing up the wrong minerals. Gideon quickly comes out of the room and starts going through the reports that Emily brought with her. He goes through one of the papers, and his expression immediately changes. Gideon looks at Vere and tells her that he had submitted a formal request to the council to meet with him. But since she is there, it would be beneficial if she came along with him immediately to the eastern coast. Vere agrees to accompany him, and together they quickly make their way to the coast. When they reach the coast, Tess is surprised to see a ship, the Dicathen, on the shore, broken and in pieces. The Dicathen is a ship that Gideon created after getting the idea from Arthur about a ship powered by steam rather than mana. When Tess asks Gideon if it is the Dicathen, Gideon shakes his head and tells her it is something worse. When Tess tries to ask him what he means, Gideon ignores her and tells her to hurry up and to enter the ship. They enter the ship, and Tess notices giant bite marks on the ship and imagines what sort of monster attacked it. Inside the ship, there are no signs of life. Rather, There is nothing at all. It had been completely wiped clean by someone. Vere tells them that someone had deliberately wiped the ship clean of anything resembling a clue to its origin. Whoever was on the ship didn't want anyone to know who they were. Emily asks if Gideon's plans got leaked somehow, but he tells her that that wasn't possible since his plans were tightly secured. Gideon goes on to inform them that just until a few weeks ago, the ship was fully submerged in the ocean, and that he wouldn't have even known about its existence if it wasn't for a random group of adventurers that came across it. Emily then asks about the crew members and asks if he thinks that they drowned. But Gideon states that if that were the case, there would at least be some remains left. Leaving no evidence or remains, the crew did not want anyone to find their ship or to even discover who they were and what they had inside the ship. Vere tells Gideon that she has a hunch but would like for him to confirm her suspicions. Gideon tells them that he was hoping that his own hunch wasn't true. He reveals to them that the ship wasn't the Dicathen, nor was it from Dicathen. He thought that maybe the lost crew of the original Dicathen had made it back in one piece somehow, but this was not the case either. The existence of that very ship changed the fundamental dynamics of the war. The ship's very own existence proved to them that the Alakrians already had in their possession ships capable of carrying whole battalions and armies across the ocean to Dicathen. Varian sits in his office and sighs at the troubles that he has landed himself into. Things are escalating a lot faster than they had anticipated. A few hours back, Gideon was given an audience with the council, where he gave them the bad news about the Alakrians being capable of transporting armies across the ocean. Gideon tells them that the part about Alakria is speculation on his behalf, but he is absolutely sure it is not the Dicathen, since he took pride in building it himself. He wanted people to know that it was his creation, so he placed markers, a sort of signature, throughout the base of the ship. But none of those markers were present, and the frame on that ship was constructed of entirely different material than the ones he used to build the Dicathen. Blaine loses his temper and says that it's bad enough that they have to deal with their enemies from appearing through dungeons, but now they have to deal with them coming across the sea as well. Priscilla says that it could be a trap, set up by Alakria to split up their forces, but Alder disagrees. He tells her that if they wanted their forces to split up, it would have made more sense for them to leave the ship on the west coast. Regardless, they have no choice and will have to fight a two-pronged attack. Blaine asks Muriel and Alduin to allow him and Priscilla to join them on their next visit to Darv, since they need to solidify their connections with the dwarves. The past few hours have taken a lot out of Virion. He calls Tess to his office and shows her a recording of a recent battle 5 days ago. Tess is horrified. Seeing her men being cut up and devoured by the Mana beasts and Alakrian soldiers made her stomach turn in disgust. Virion tells her that out of the 400 they sent down to the dungeon to fight, only 180 of the men returned. He tells her that she's a talented mage, and with her training, she could be considered a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. However, she is just one person, and all it takes is one small mistake to end her life. He asks Tess if she is still willing to go out and fight even after witnessing and hearing about how dangerous it could be. Without any hesitation, Tess looks her grandfather dead in the eyes and tells him that she is ready. With her answer, Virion hands her a sword and tells her to prove her resolve. To satisfy his concerns, Virion takes her to a massive room to test her abilities through combat. They both lock into battle as Virion quickly goes into his beast state and immediately dashes toward Tess. But Tess manages to dodge his initial attack and, in retaliation, uses her vines to try and subdue Virion. However, Virion is way too fast and agile in his beast state for any of her vines to grab him. Knowing this, Tess uses her vines to lead her grandfather into a corner, allowing her to get behind him. But Virion quickly notices Tess's presence and blocks her sneak attack. He then grabs her from midair and proceeds to slam her into the ground. Luckily, Tess's vines catch her before she could make impact, and they spring her back into action. Varian comments on Tess's improved control over her beast will as the two of them clash multiple times. In the middle of their clash, Tess suddenly becomes engulfed in her vines. Worried that Tess may have lost control of her beast will like before, he calls out to her. Tess then breaks out of the vine shell, now more powerful than ever, as she summons two vine swords and tells her grandfather to prepare himself. The two move at astounding speeds as they clash and trade consecutive blows, landing more scratches on each other. Although she had gained more strength, her stamina was quickly draining. Varian took advantage of this and cracked Tess on the chin with a kick and quickly incapacitated her. Tess hangs her head in defeat after her bout with Varian. But Varian tells her to pick up her head and to address him as commander. Tess couldn't believe her grandfather's words. She hugs Varian and thanks him for finally reconsidering. Varian tells her that there are still conditions that she must follow. After listing his conditions, he ends his list by telling Tess that she must avoid any situation forcing her to use her second phase transformation. Since she didn't have complete control of it, it would be reckless of her to use it. Although she was unhappy with the condition, Tess understood her grandfather's concern and agreed not to use it. Before she left to find her parents, Varian informs her that from now on, he will treat her as a soldier and not as his granddaughter. Whether it was a direct order from himself or his generals, Tess needed to follow his orders completely and understand that every order was for the good of Dicathen. After dealing with Tess, Varian goes to visit Cynthia in her room. Anna, Cynthia's caretaker, was present there taking care of Cynthia. He asks Anna how Cynthia was doing, and Anna informs him that she just gave her the necessary supplements to keep her body healthy. Apart from that, there has been no improvement on her part. Physically, Cynthia is in great shape, but no matter what they try, they can't get her to wake up. Anna leaves Varian alone with Cynthia and tells him to take as much time as he needed. Varian sits down next to his old friend and starts to talk. He tells her about how the Alacrian army is capable of building steamships and how they will be using them to transport thousands of soldiers to their shores. He also tells her about Tess and how he has finally allowed his granddaughter to go and join the army. Varian starts to cry as he tells Cynthia that he stepped down as king because he wanted to avoid participating in what he is doing right now. But now he's doing it at a much larger scale. He has Alder taking care of him, making sure that he is emotionally, mentally, and physically fit to lead Dicathen in the war. What he really wants is to sit in a garden and watch his granddaughter grow up. He has already outlived his wife and doesn't want to do the same with his children or grandchild. Varian grabs Cynthia's hand and apologizes for making her succumb to such a state. He knew that she could die if she revealed information about Alacria and the Vrutra, but to gain the upper hand in the war, he stayed quiet and allowed her to put her own life in danger. He tells her that although there may be people who condemn her for being a spy, he will never, because when it mattered most, she chose to stand up against her people in order to help the people of Dicathen. Varian gets up at last and looks down at Cynthia as he tells her that he won't be able to visit her for a while, since the real war was about to start. But he promises her that as soon as the war was over, he would come back and do everything in his power to wake her up. 3 months go by, and Tess officially joins the army. Currently, her battalion is deployed to clear out a dungeon. She and her squad are currently engaged in combat with some monsters. Darvis, a reckless boy dual-wielding giant axes, cuts through the monsters like butter. While Tess, Darvis, and Caria, the gauntlet-wearing soldier, take care of the monsters, Stannard, a mage from the backline, tries to locate the pack leader. Caria tells Tess that they should fall back since they were beginning to be overwhelmed by the monsters, and since they were only scouting anyway. Tess agrees with her and tells everyone to fall back. As they make their way back, Tess ties every monster with her vines and tells Stannard to go all out. He shouts at Caria and Darvis to get out of the way as he loads a magic spell into his gun. Stannard aims at the tied-up monsters and fires the round, incinerating every monster. Darvis sighs, surprised that Stannard had just brewed up a new spell. Stannard tells him that it is a powerful attack, but the recoil from it is painful. Tess, being the leader of the squad, orders them to stop all their chatting and tells them that they need to retreat, since the fire won't hold the monsters off for too long. They make their way back, terrified of the barely edible supper they were about to indulge in. When they arrive back at camp, Tess tells her team to wash up and get ready for supper. After cleaning up, Tess gets a surprise visit from Helen. She gives her a hug and is surprised to see that the entire Twin Horns party is at her camp. Tess turns to her squad and introduces them to the Twin Horns. She barely gets a chance to introduce them before Darvis dashes past her and starts flirting with Rose. Carria manages to pull them back from her. Everyone, however, is more interested in Stannard's crossbow. Stannard is surprised that they are talking to him and gladly explains that it's not a crossbow, but that instead it is a mana gun that he's made with his own deviant powers to shoot spells through beast cores. Even though he has a dual affinity of both fire and wind, his own core is too weak and does not allow him to store normal amounts of mana, so he uses this method instead. Tess is proud of her team since it has the youngest people in the entire camp in it, and they have all been working hard, keeping up with everyone else. Although she was happy to see her friends, she wondered why Helen and the Twin Horns were at their station. Helen tells her that they have been deployed at the wall for months, but have been sent to their station to help with scouting. She warns Tess that it would be best for her and her team to prepare for what was about to come. Stannard asks what they saw at the wall, making the entire Twin Thorns squad fall silent. Seeing the looks on their faces, Tess asks Helen if they had actually fought against the Alacrian army. Helen tells her that they had been fighting them for over 4 months now. She tells Tess that the mages are not their main problem, but that the beasts are. That is why they were dispatched to this cavern. The Alacrians are able to control and manipulate the hundreds of thousands of mutated S-class mana beasts in the dungeon. The mutants controlled by the Alacrians were mostly rulers in their own dungeons. By controlling them, the Alacrians had control over the rest of the mana beasts that served under them. They needed to find and kill these mutant leaders quickly before the Alacrians could gather enough mana beasts to fully advance and break down the wall. Tess asks Helen more about the fights she had at the wall, causing Adam to get annoyed. He berates Tess, telling her that the fights at the wall were not bedtime stories that her nanny used to read to her. He sternly reminds her that this was war and that people die. But Tess doesn't flinch, and in a serious tone she tells him that she understands and that she just wants to prepare herself and her team for the upcoming battle. Before Adam could say any more, Rose pulls him away from Tess and takes him away to cool off. Helen apologizes for Adam's behavior, saying that they all have been on edge and that he's only lashing out because he doesn't want them to know about the horrors of the battlefield. Helen tells them that at Tess' station, they are just fighting monsters. She warns them that the Alacrian soldiers are much more monstrous than any beast that they have ever faced. Helen states that while the beasts fight for survival, the Alacrians will fight to kill, and to some extent, that could be considered merciful. When asked what she meant by that, Jasmine jumped in and tells them that she's talking about information. She goes on to state that when in war, getting information from either side is very crucial. So if you are not killed on the battlefield, the enemy will most likely imprison and torture you for information. Jasmine warns Tess and her group that fighting monsters is one thing, but fighting another human being is something else. She cautions them that when the enemy can speak, beg for mercy, or even cry in pain, things become a lot grayer and they may end up questioning their own motives. Before Tess could ask more questions, they suddenly hear a voice calling for help. The group turns around to find a soldier calling for a medic. Helen turns to Tess and asks her if incidents like that happen often, but Tess tells her no. They decide to visit the man at the infirmary where Drogo, the leader of the battalion, is also present to see what the commotion is about. They look at the man as the nurse, Albreda, informs them about his condition. The man was severely dehydrated and was massively fatigued. To her, it looked like he hadn't eaten or had anything to drink for days. And by looking at his feet, she could tell that he had been running nonstop for quite some time. The man suddenly jolts up, unable to make sense of his surroundings. Albreda calmed him down and gave him some water before Drogo could begin to question him. Drogo asked him to explain what happened and where the rest of his team was. The man clenched his sheets as he told them that his entire group was dead. He goes on to state that while he and his group were in the dungeon, they had a disagreement. The argument became so bad that he left them by themselves in frustration. But he felt guilty about their fight, so he decided to rejoin them. However, when he got back to them, they were all already dead. They had been slaughtered and killed by an ambush of beasts far deadlier than the ones they have been dealing with. He was lucky and managed to get away. He hid for days before finally getting a chance to escape. The man tells them that the beasts were guarding a massive door which he believed was the den of the mutants. Just a few moments later, Drogo's voice echoed through the large cavern, alerting everyone to prepare for battle. Over 100 soldiers scurried around to prepare themselves for the impending battle. Stannard looks around and sees that everyone is on edge. They have been preparing for this very moment for the past 3 months. Stannard starts to count the numbers of spells he has nervously. Keria comes over to him and tells him to stretch a bit before the battle, so he can relax. Drogo gathers everyone up in the dungeon to brief them. He tells them to be vigilant, since there was no telling how many mana beasts will be on the other side. As Drogo gave his speech, Tess turned to her comrades and tells them that they will all get out of the battle alive, and that they'll eat a delicious meal after they've won. They all nod in agreement as they charge into battle. Moments later, Stannard finds himself completely defeated. The mana beasts were greater and stronger than the soldiers had anticipated. He looked up and saw a girl getting strangled by a monster. Keria and Darvis move in to try and save her. They kill the beast, but not in time to save the girl. Stannard loses focus for a brief moment watching the bloodbath, but returns to his senses when Keria warns him about the enemy behind him. Darvis tells Stannard that it's about time that he became useful, motivating Stannard to get active. Tess swiftly makes her way through the hordes of enemies, tying them up with her vines, before moving in to decapitate them quickly. She tells Darvis to round up all the monsters together, so that they could take them out in one shot. Darvis cuts off the monsters' paths, allowing everyone to regroup as some of the mages collapse the floor beneath the monsters, causing them all to fall into a ditch. Everyone grouped together and shot every single magic spell that they had into the ditch, before making room for Stannard to use his final spell. He loads up his spell in his gun and shoots it, knocking him off his feet and annihilating all the monsters in a massive explosion. Everyone cheers as they watch the beasts get reduced to ash. Drogo immediately starts shouting orders, telling healers to get to work, and telling everyone to help take any injured soldiers back to the camp. He gets on top of a mound of dead monsters and congratulated everyone for their triumphant victory. Even though they were ambushed by the mana beasts, he tells them that the deaths of their comrades would not be in vain. Stannard looks around and notices all of his fallen comrades. He wonders if they can call it a triumphant victory when they have already lost 10 men along with countless injured soldiers. They haven't even reached the den and have such a loss. The healers quickly gather the dead and the injured, making preparations to take them back to the camp. Stannard looks over at Tess, who has a grim look on her face after seeing the dead, and wonders how many more will die in this battle. Everyone decided to get some rest before engaging in the final battle, as the healers scurried to heal everyone. Stannard looked over at Tess, who was still in a bad mood, and asked her what's wrong. She tells him that everything is okay, but her expression told a different story. Keria tells Tess not to worry too much since everyone did their best, and she reminds her that what matters most is that they won. Stannard backs up Keria's statement, saying that she's right. They all knew what they were risking every time they went into battle, and it is impossible for them to save every soldier. This makes Tess feel a little better, but she still comments that at her rate, she still will not be able to catch up to Arthur. Hearing this, Caria asks if she's thinking about Arthur, which annoys Darvis. He tells Tess that she describes him as some all-powerful, inhumanly charismatic hotshot without a single flaw, and he tells her that there's no way that that's true. Caria tells him off in a mocking tone that he's just jealous because Arthur is everything he wishes he could be, causing Darvis to lose his temper. Darvis tells her that Arthur doesn't seem like a good guy to him, since after Tess was kidnapped, he didn't even make sure she was okay before heading off to who knows where. To him, it seems like he was just trying to run away from the war. Tess steps up to defend Arthur's name. She tells Darvis that Arthur may be clueless and naive in some areas, but he is not a coward, and that his desire to protect his loved ones is too strong for that. Not wanting to argue anymore, Darvis just turns his back and leaves, mocking Tess under his breath. Stannard tries to lighten the mood and asks Tess if Arthur is really as strong as she says, and she vouches for his strength. She promises to introduce them to him if they ever meet again. Everyone starts to make their way to the den again, but it was oddly quiet. Drogo motions towards them to get ready since they were quickly approaching the spot the scout mentioned to them. Based on his report, there should be at least a few hundred gnolls and orcs, even stronger than the ones they just fought. He wishes everyone luck as they all rush forward. But suddenly, everyone stops in their tracks, shocked to see that every monster had already been defeated. Even Darvis got swayed as he said that he had no idea whether to be relieved or scared. Drogo gestures at a few men to open the door to the den. Everyone got ready to fight whatever was on the other side. As they pushed the door open, countless bodies of beasts start to tumble out of it, causing everyone to stand frozen in shock. Tess began to make her way into the den. As she looked up at the mountain of dead bodies, she was surprised to see that the one sitting on top of all the dead carcasses was Arthur. Everyone got ready to fight as a small furry creature pounced on top of Tess. Drogo and his men rushed to her side to defend her, but Tess tells them it's okay, and that Sylvie is friendly. Drogo turns his attention toward Arthur and demanded to know who he was and what he was doing alone in the dungeon. Arthur tells him not to worry since he was an ally. Helen and the rest of her squad rushed toward Arthur to greet him. Stannard looked over at them and wondered why Tess wasn't as happy to see Arthur. Drogo interrupts Arthur's reunion and asked what happened since he wasn't told that anyone would be joining them on their mission. Arthur tells him that he's sure that no one knew since he was just teleported there about half an hour ago. He didn't expect to be teleported directly into the middle of the beast horde, so he was busy taking care of them. Drogo found it hard to believe that Arthur took down all the mana beasts, including the S-class mutants, all by himself. Stannard asked about what happened to all the beast cores. Arthur tells him that Sylvie has a large appetite and that she ate all of them. Suddenly, a surviving beast came rushing toward Arthur, but before anyone could move, Arthur instantly decapitated the beast and apologized for missing one of the monsters. He tells Drogo that if he has any more questions, he should at least let him wash up and let him eat something first. Drogo still had a hard time trusting him, but agreed to take him to their camp when Tess and the Twin Horns party vouched for Arthur. They headed back to the camp, and Tess could already tell that Arthur was clearly keeping secrets. She knew that he was only debriefing what he deemed as necessary. This left Drogo unsatisfied, but it gave him enough information to plan his next course of action. When everyone left, Tess finally got a chance to talk with Arthur alone. Her heart began to race as she sat next to Arthur. Arthur finally broke the silence and smiled at Tess as he told her that he missed her. Tess broke down into tears as she called him an idiot and hugged him. While Tess and Arthur talked, the rest of her party waited outside to allow them to catch up. Darvis slumped down as he stated that everything that happened today ended up being way too anticlimactic for him. Caria, however, thought it was pretty eventful since Arthur was able to take down so many beasts that the rest of them would have had a tough time dealing with. Darvis says that Arthur is lying and that it's not possible for only one person to take down all those beasts. But Caria tells him that he just sounds jealous. Not falling for Arthur's obvious bluff, Darvis tells them that he was going to challenge Arthur to a duel. Both Caria and Stannard are instantly against the idea. Stannard tells him that Tess always talked about Arthur, so they should give him the benefit of the doubt. Darvis and Stannard quickly get into it and began insulting each other. Realizing that he was in the wrong, Darvis apologizes, saying that he's becoming more like his old man day by day. But for him, this was something different. Tess and Arthur soon joined them after, and the first thing that Darvis did was challenge Arthur to a duel. Everyone gathered around to see the duel. Since Darvis was one of them, nearly everyone was cheering him on. Before they began, Arthur asked Darvis why he challenged him to a duel. Darvis replied that he challenged him to uphold his pride as a man, causing Caria and Stannard to cringe out of embarrassment. Drogo stepped up and explained the rules of the duel to them. They were to keep mana usage strictly to body augmentation, and the first one to yield or otherwise become incapacitated loses. Drogo himself was interested in seeing Arthur fight since he wanted to see if he was as strong as he claimed. As soon as they were ready, Drogo motioned at them to start the duel. Without any hesitation, Darvis darted toward Arthur, but as soon as he got close enough to him, Darvis quickly retreated after seeing the look in Arthur's eyes. Stannard, being someone who had seen Darvis mercilessly hack away at monsters and also beat down adventurers twice his size with a content smile on his face, could not believe that someone was causing Darvis to sweat in fear. Darvis musters up the courage and attacks Arthur again. He moved with incredible speed trying to land a hit on Arthur. But Arthur easily dodged his attacks and got inside to land a strike on Darvis. Stunned by Arthur's insane reaction speed, Darvis threw a rock at him as a distraction before attacking again. But Arthur easily broke the rock and blocked Darvis's attack. He then moved in and quickly struck Darvis in various spots on his body. Darvis fell to his stomach, unable to move. Caria couldn't believe that Arthur had ruptured Darvis's mana flow, especially since the pressure points he had to hit were incredibly small to target. As Darvis began to panic and worried that something was wrong with his body, Varian appeared with Alder and assured him that he would be fine. After the duel, Arthur met up with Varian and Alder. He asked them how they found out where he was. Varian tells him that Alder got a message from Lord Winsome, so they came right away. Arthur tells them that Ren is at fault and that he was the one who sent him there. As soon as he arrived, he was attacked by beasts and had to fend for himself. Varian tells Arthur that they have a lot to discuss and that they must leave immediately. This caused Tess to become sad since she and Arthur had just reconnected a few hours ago and already he was leaving again. Varian tells her that she has her own duties to focus on just like Arthur and that was what she should be focused on. Tess remembered her promise to her grandfather and she saluted Varian, assuring him that she would not be a burden. Arthur prepared to leave with Varian and Alder. When he went outside, he spotted Stannard, who gave him an awkward salute, causing Darvis to snap at him. Arthur arrived at the gate and stepped into it, teleporting him to the main castle. As soon as Arthur arrived at the other side, he was surprised to find a giant bear waiting for him. Arthur looks closely at the bear before Ellie popped out on top of it, surprising him. She jumped on Arthur and gave him a huge hug. As he messed with his sister, telling her that she was too old to be jumping on people, Arthur looked up and saw his parents. Afraid of how they would act toward him, Arthur looked away. But to his surprise, his parents hugged him deeply. Arthur was confused by their reaction to his arrival, but they told him that regardless of who he was in the past, he was still the son that they raised and loved. Plus, they've already invested too much into him to give him up now. Ellie then pulled Arthur to the side to show him Boo, her bear. Arthur asked her if she was talking about the giant dog in front of him. Boo gets mad at him and tells Arthur not to make fun of him. It struck Arthur on the shoulder to show its dominance, but Arthur doesn't flinch or move. Ellie tells Arthur to forgive Boo for his actions, and that he just wanted to see if Arthur was as strong as Ellie said he was. Arthur was surprised that Ellie was bonded with the beast and asked when she got Boo. Varian tells him that Lord Winsome gave Boo to his family before he departed. He was just a baby then, but quickly grew in 2 years. Alder interrupts their reunion and tells Arthur that they have a lot to discuss. He tells Arthur not to worry about his family since they were now staying at the castle. Leaving his family behind, Alder, Varian, and Arthur sat down at a table to discuss their current predicament. Varian takes a deep breath and starts off. He tells Arthur that Cynthia is currently in a state of self-induced slumber in order to help her cope with the effects of the curse that was activated when she disclosed information about the Aulocrians. Arthur grits his teeth and tells them to explain everything. For the next several hours, Arthur bombarded the two leaders with all the questions he had. He had been out of the loop for 2 years, since Winsome and Wren only disclosed information that they thought was necessary, while the Gladers had been focusing most of their efforts on Darv to try and ally with the dwarves. Curtis, Kathleen, and Tess had joined the main battlefields. His family was sent to the castle for protection, while the Helsty family had gone elsewhere to assist with war efforts. Varian informed Arthur that his father had expressed his desire to participate in the battle. However, Varian refrained from granting him permission until his arrival or until Eleanor became older. They moved to the more pressing matter at hand, and Varian informs him about the current battle. He tells Arthur of the Aulocrians' ploy to engage them in combat through the mutant mana beasts, and says that the Aulocrians were doing it purposely in order to buy themselves some time. Arthur agrees with Varian's prediction, as it seems to be the most reasonable explanation as to why Aulochria hadn't launched a full-fledged attack yet. Alder hands Arthur some papers as evidence of what they think is their actual plan. Arthur looks at the papers and is surprised to see that they were the plans for the Dicathen, but Alder tells him that it's not their ship. Somehow, the Aulocrians got their hands on Arthur's design and built ships capable of transporting thousands of soldiers across the vast ocean. Arthur is frustrated that his plans got leaked. Their meeting comes to a halt when a soldier bursts into the meeting room and tells them news that they did not want to hear. The soldier tells them that the Aulocrian ships had been spotted approaching from the west coast. When Arthur heard the news that the enemy had arrived at their shores, he and Sylvie dashed out of the meeting room and headed straight to the coast. When Arthur reached the castle doors, the guards pulled him back and told him that no one could enter or exit without Varian or Alder's authorization. They tell him that it is not safe to go outside alone and that he needed a guardian. Not having enough time to argue with them, Arthur used his powers to subdue them and tells them to let him leave. Alder puts a hand on Arthur's shoulder and tells the guards to let him go and makes Arthur release his grip on them. He warns Arthur not to do anything foolish, since it would be a shame to have wasted all of Winsome's time. Arthur agrees and tells the guards to set the gate to Etiston City. Meanwhile, in Cynthia's room, 2 shadow figures appear, and they begin to converse with her. They tell her that she must give them as much information about the Aulocrians as possible, as it could help them win the war. They tell her to think of the millions of lives that she could help save. The dark figures sinisterly smile as they remind her that it's okay if she dies from the effects of the curse, as long as she gives them what they want. Cynthia opens her eyes as the thought of death terrifies her. Her mind wanders off to a pleasant dream of a much more peaceful time when she was taking a stroll with Varian. She tells him about opening up a magic school in Cyrus and calling it Cyrus Academy. Varian laughed at her for being so simple-minded and for naming the school after the city, but Cynthia was determined to make it the best magic school in the world and blew him off. Seeing her enthusiasm, Varian tells her that he'll help her open the school and hopes that one day his grandkids can attend her school. The dream begins to fade away as blood starts to drip from her stomach. Suddenly, Varian hears a loud shriek. He runs out of his office and sees the guards rushing towards Cynthia's room. Virion realizes what is happening and dashes toward her room. The promise he made to her about waking her up floods back into his mind. He remembers her words telling him to create a better future rather than trying to correct the past. Virion opens the doors to her room and falls to his knees as he gazes at the lifeless body of Cynthia, impaled by cursed shards. Virion screams in pain as he begins to weep. Meanwhile, the guards at the city gate tried to block Arthur, but Arthur tells them that if they don't step aside, then he'll make his own exit. Sylvie quickly transforms, and they burst through the doors as they both rush toward the coast. On his way there, Arthur tried to figure out how his plans about the Dicathen ended up in Alakria's hands. He remembered how excited Gideon was when he saw his blueprints and how he couldn't contain his excitement to work on them. They had made sure that his plans were secured no matter what. Arthur lands on top of a mountain and heads straight to the cliff to get a better view of the ocean. Arthur tells himself that although he never considered himself a righteous hero, since his only reason for fighting was to protect his loved ones, he now had another reason to fight. As Arthur stared at the countless Alakrian ships littered across the ocean approaching Dicathen, he prepared himself for war. Because now, he needed to correct the mistake that he had caused.